What is going on, you guys? It is Sean from Team Honey Badger here. I have to bring you guys a discussion video on my top 5 favorite budget decks. So most of these decks are under $100, and if you can afford them if you're a budget player, I highly recommend you look at them if you're looking for something that you could play semi-competitively or competitively depending on what the budget deck is. And here are my top 5 choices. So without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so one of my favorite budget decks is Celestials. I always found Celestials' mechanic of being able to gain effects or power, like the Magial card you see in the screen, during your opponent's turn, and having a face-up card of your Vanguard in your damage zone to be appealing to me at least. And the fact that most things in the deck do not use Celestial Counterblast, they just require Celestial Heart or Celestial Vanguard, makes it very versatile. So you could combine it with the new support for Angel Feather and get some really interesting deck lists going. Especially the fact that you could also gain some insane power-ups during your turn. So by when a card is put into your damage zone. So they have their own Broken Heart clone and it isn't Generation Break. So it's a very good choice. It's definitely a cheap budget deck, $50 for the main deck. And you're going to be looking at the rest of the money used for the strides. So next on my list is a deck that hasn't gotten support for a long time, and I guarantee you this won't be a budget deck this will only be a budget deck for a little bit longer, and that is G Era Oracle Think Tank. So drawing cards in this deck, breaking even on card advantage most of the time, and plussing has always been appealing to me, but I've never had the urge to build it in real life because I don't think it's as strong yet. But I think this is a great budget choice going forward. I think it could potentially turn into something better, especially with Susanro's on-stride skill. It gets you back the card that you used to stride, so you really don't take a minus from it. So instead of that triple drive being a +2, it turns into a +3. Sort of like X Gallop in Cosmic Heroes. And if you have some extra money, you could use it to buy Silent Toms. Those are from the old era. And some old school stuff too. Maybe even Coco if you're a fan of that build. This next one is a bit expensive if you didn't pick up the Ren Suzuka Mori Legend deck. So this is Despre Diablo. Despre Diablo is a deck that focuses on retiring your opponent's rear guard, so when you get to Phantom Blast or Diablo, they can't guard at all from their hand. They could of course G-guard it, but this deck is very consistent, very strong. And all you really have to do is pick up the Ren Suzuka Mori Legend deck, few strides. You could get Aura Geysers. I know it's a bit expensive. That's the only thing in this deck that's really not as budget as it seems. But it's recommended, but it's not needed because the win con of the deck is Phantom Blast for Diablo. And you also just picked up a smattering of commons rares from GBT06 and the deck is complete. And it's very easy to play. So if you're somebody who's like, oh, I'm still new to the game, I don't want to think as much, this deck is definitely the deck for you. So that's Despre Diablo, and it's even won a few tournaments. So on to the next budget deck, shouldn't surprise people. So the next budget deck, like I said, shouldn't surprise people, is the Gurgrit Unite build. Gurgrit Unite is basically made by getting to the start deck, which is $10, getting a whole bunch of commons and rares from GBT07, and 2 of the Generation Rare, and 2 of the G Guardians, and just slapping it in the deck, and it's basically done. That's really it. It's going to cost you about 100 max for a complete deck and a mostly completed G Zone. You could just add in some other options that you want. Some of the stuff could be expensive, but I know the Gurgwheat Stride, which you need to have, has dropped down to about $20. So that's only $60 for the main win con and the 2 start decks. And the start deck gives you a lot of options, and a lot of the commons and rares are really easy to get, especially if you get them from your locals, which they usually do 10 cents a common and 50 cents a rare. So shouldn't be that hard to get. And I highly recommend this deck if you're wanting to get into a competitive Vanguard and you're on a budget, especially because this deck is not going to stop getting support because it's getting support in GBT08 Absolute Judgment with the new stride that they're getting. So Gurgrit Unite, great budget deck. Highly recommend you look into it if you're looking to get in competitive Vanguard and you're on a budget. Before I reveal my number one favorite budget deck, here are a few honorable mentions. I really like Machinings. I think Machine Destroyer is a great card, and Mega Colony in general is getting support, and Machinings are getting more and more budget for some reason, except Machine Destroyer, which is rising a little bit, but it's still a decently priced card. So, Machine Destroyer basically stops your Vanguard from standing, and it's pretty good. And I find it to be very good against some decks. So if you're looking for a great budget deck that counters pretty much everything, I recommend Machinings. But it has some consistency issues, like they lack a card advantage engine, but that's understandable because if they got that, that'd be a bit broken. Next on my honorable mentions list is Musketeers. Musketeers is definitely one of my favorite decks that I play on Area. If you find me, I'm probably playing Musketeers or Sanctuary Guard or Blau. Sanctuary Guard. Musketeers have the same rush that Sanctuary Guard does, and I think that rush turn on turn 2 is still so good. And they basically have their own Sword Me clone, but it's just top decking. But it gets you free cards on the board for nothing other than calling it. So you play one card, you get another, it's a free +1. So that's why I consider this a great budget deck. Everything's cheap, costs about $80 to make. Yeah, it's not much more to say other than it's awesome. For my last budget deck, it shouldn't surprise you. Pure Sanctuary Guard. Now I put this on the list because Sanctuary Guard Dragon playset is $60, and the only stride you need pretty much is Regale and whatever strides you want, because Regale will be putting most of the work in for you. So the deck has gotten cheap now, and I would say to a degree, budgetable if you buy from the right people and price it out correctly. This deck is probably still one of the best budget decks, and if we ever get the Daigo G trial deck or G special set, it will be probably the best budget deck in the game. But for now, this deck costs about $110, give or take. If you want the Alt strides, you probably want to add an extra $40 on top of that. So yeah, it focuses on attacking with Naya Twin Sword multiple times, which is a trial deck card. And most of the deck, other than Sanctuary Guard Dragon and the G Zone, is commons and rares, so it shouldn't be that hard to get. So anyway guys, thank you all for watching. I hope you appreciate this video on my top 5 favorite budget decks. So I'm going to leave you with a question: what is your favorite budget deck? And I'll catch you all next time. Bye.